Hey everyone! Welcome to the first video of mine not shot on Zoom. If you didn't know, I am super into the self-help / personal development space. I read a lot of books, consume a lot of that kind of content. So today I wanted to share my top picks of that kind of content that has made the most impact in my life. So the first thing I wanted to share is a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People for Teen Girls. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about the adult version of this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This book is by his daughter, Donna Dale Carnegie, and she essentially took her dad's same principles and adapted it for a younger audience. And at first, I was a little bit hesitant about sharing this book because if you look at it, it's like a hot pink cover with like glittery purple text on it. And I don't know, I just felt a little bit embarrassed. I think because the look of the book doesn't look like it's anything like really sophisticated. Even though I read it as a teenage girl, it's something that really impacted my life. But I'm sure it was like my inner misogynist speaking of like, all womanly things are bad. But anyways, this book super changed my life. I think one of the main things, if I were to summarize it in a sentence of how it's impacted me, is it taught me how to deal with people. And it taught me about human nature and how similar all humans are, and therefore how we can empathize with each other. One great example from this book is how we all have this innate human desire to be liked and appreciated. And of course it talks about it in this like teen girl lens, but I think that still holds true for any human being. We're social creatures. We just want to be liked and accepted in the world and in our communities. And so strong is that human desire that if you are the rare special person that can fulfill that desire in other people, you hold a lot of power and influence. So if you think about it, we all have this untapped influence in our lives, which is solved by something very simple, which they talk about in the book, and that's gratitude. Telling the people in your life that you love and appreciate them, which is so simple. And I think that's something that a lot of us overlook, thinking that maybe it will make us look weak, but in fact, it's actually the opposite. So that really inspired me to be more communicative with my gratitude towards the people in my life. And even just talking about it now, it's something that I could probably up the ante a little bit more currently. Another great example of this in the book about being liked and appreciated is they talk about dogs. And I don't have the physical copy of my book in front of me, and it's been a while since I've read it, but the words stuck with me so much. I think it said something along the lines of like, why is your dog, or why is a dog a girl's best friend? Because it doesn't care if you just flunked your math test or you have like a Texas size zit on your nose or on your face. It like jumps all over you like you were the best thing since bacon. Something along those lines. And it goes on to say, imagine if we as humans showed even 1/10 of that enthusiasm, which I think was just such a crazy example. And I've never really been a dog or animal person, to be honest, but I see how much joy dogs bring into people's lives because they're so excited to see you all the time. They just love you so much. And if we could show, as the book said, 1/10 that amount of enthusiasm and love towards other people, imagine how crazy that would be. So I can't cover all the topics of that book. I can't remember all of them, but I highly, highly, highly recommend that book. It is something that every human should read, girl, boy, anything in between or not that, any age. I think it's such an amazing book. The next thing I want to talk about is another book called You Are a Badass. Another somewhat embarrassing title, I guess, but doesn't matter. Totally changed my life. I read this in my senior year of college, and this book really introduced me to the whole world of like self-love and manifestation. If I could use two words to describe that book, those would be the two. In a nutshell, this book taught me about the importance of self-love and how that cascades into all areas of your life. And the reason that this book really resonated with me is it didn't come from a place of feeling like super dejected or unworthy. I think at the time that I read this book, it wasn't that I didn't love myself. In my mind, I thought I was great, but I was struggling with living up to my potential. I think I knew deep down there was so much potential, somebody really confident and awesome just waiting to come out, but when I looked around, it wasn't necessarily my reality. And what this book taught me was how self-love just helps bring that person out. And when I read the book and I started to live by it, I really saw my life change before my very eyes. And it was really incredible to see how just loving myself and respecting myself helped me command the love and respect of other people in my life who I felt were maybe bringing me down at the time. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is a podcast. And I have listened to a fair number of podcasts, but this is the one that I listen to without fail. I always go back to this, even when there's like a lull in my podcast game. This is the one I come back to, and it is the Tim Ferriss Show. Super, super popular podcast, so I'm sure a lot of you probably already know it and listen to it. But this is by far my favorite podcast. And if you haven't heard of the Tim Ferriss Show, Tim Ferriss is this, I guess he's like in the self-improvement space as well. And he interviews top performers, basically people who are at the top of their field. And he interviews people in various different fields and basically asks them about their best practices, any tips and tricks that have helped them reach their point of success. What's so great about this podcast is that Tim is such an amazing interviewer. And I interview people for my job as well as a user researcher. And I have learned so much from his podcast just about how to ask great questions. And if you listen, he interviews extremely famous people, and you'll constantly hear his guests saying like, wow, no one has ever asked me that before. Or the guests will tell stories that they've never told on any form of media before, which is crazy with the amount of times that they've been interviewed. But Tim has this way of drawing out these awesome stories and these like awesome little nuggets that I think are so great. And he also really knows how to serve his audience, and he knows the questions that his audience will ask him, and they're always like the very specific things. And when his guests go into talking about their morning routine, let's say, and they kind of gloss over it vaguely, he does a great job of saying, okay, just like hold on a second, what do you really do? Like what does it look like? Paint a picture for me. And as a listener, that obviously really helps me or anybody listening, like, okay, I get it now. I can now apply those things into my life. Next up is a YouTuber, and if you are at all familiar with the kind of like beauty and lifestyle space, you will know her, and she is Jen Im. She is someone that I have followed for a long time now. There are two very concrete things that I have learned from her over the years. The first is how to speak more confidently. I think one of the reasons that I gravitated towards her initially was because of her voice. I watched her and I just really loved the way that she spoke. And I knew she was a couple years older, but I didn't know anybody that talked with such confidence, and I really wanted to emulate that. And over the years, high school and college, as I was applying to internships and stuff, I actually used to watch her videos before I had an interview, like a phone interview or even an in-person interview, just so that I could hear the intonation in her voice and try to emulate that. I just really loved the way that she talked, and I still do, obviously, but that's something that has really made an impact on me, weirdly. The second thing is how to be unapologetic. And watching her videos over the years, I think she started to show a little bit more of her personal side. And she's just so unapologetic about things that I feel like I would be embarrassed about. So, like the first two books I talked about that are kind of girly, like Jen would never feel embarrassed about that. She would just own it. Two things that I can think of off the top of my head is her Korean. So she's Korean by ethnicity, but she grew up in the States. And recently, I think over the past couple years, she's wanted to improve her Korean. And you can see her at the very beginning of her journey just struggling to speak a little bit, but she completely owns where she is. And that's something that resonates with me because, like, my Chinese kind of sucks. Another example is about flexibility. Oddly, these are all examples that I really resonate with, but I think recently she started stretching a little bit more, and you can see that she's super unflexible, and that's something that I've been really embarrassed about, like not being able to touch my toes. But just to see somebody out there owning it, I guess that's why representation is so important. But it was really great to see somebody just owning their flaws, and even if they're not flaws, just owning your personality. Another YouTuber I want to talk about is Nur, and she's got two channels. I think her beauty channel is NurberXO, and then her inner beauty channel, I think is how she calls it, is Neurology. I'm not quite sure she's active on YouTube anymore, but I found her a number of years ago, and she is amazing. There were two videos initially that kind of turned me on to her. The first one was called How to Be Confident, and I think the second one was How to Speak with Confidence. She is a great teacher. She gives very, very practical, actionable advice on confidence, and I think I watched her starting in high school, and that really, really helped me. And she's super into like psychology and human behavior, and she looks at everything through that lens. And you can tell by watching her that she has such a good grasp of the human brain, and she teaches you methods of, I guess, how to hack your own brain to improve your life. So things like habits she talks about a lot. She's really into like a morning routine. And of course she talks a lot about confidence and where that comes from. And if you watch her videos, she is able to distill very actionable advice for you that you can apply to your life right away. The last thing I want to talk about is yet another YouTube channel called The School of Life, and they're pretty popular, so you may have heard of them, but they have a lot of videos on essentially how to navigate life's struggles. And they're not like rah self-improvement like a lot of the other things that I've talked about, and I actually really like that about the channel. And it has this sort of like British pessimism, which I really love. And the channel introduced me to the concept of the good enough something. So the good enough partner, good enough mother, good enough like boss or employee. And that was such a breakthrough for me. I think what I gained from this channel most was how they talk about love and romanticism. One of my favorite videos or topics that they talk about is how romanticism ruined relationships, and essentially how we have put so much weight on the idea of romanticism, which just is not realistic in our lives, and how we should reclaim a good enough relationship. They have a lot of videos on just navigating life's challenges. And what I really love about the channel is that it normalizes a lot of the struggles that we have in the daily life, like not being good enough or being lonely, and things like that. And also all the videos, or most of the videos, are voiced in a British accent because it's based in the UK, and it's always very soothing to listen to. So that about wraps it up for today's video. I hope there was something in here that was new to you or something that you learned. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are these things that you have read or listened to or watched before? Is there anything that you have consumed that has made a great deal of impact in your life? Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.